You're listening to fmgradio.com. Are you ready to take control of your physical, emotional, spiritual, professional, and financial health? Are you ready to experience great success in your life? Each week, join Dr. Diane A. Thompson and her guests for tools and strategies to help you take control of your health and inspire you to live your best life. Now here is your host, Dr. Diane A. Thompson.
Welcome to Health Talk with Dr. Diane, MD. This is a show designed to inform and inspire you to a healthier lifestyle. I am your host, Diane A. Thompson, MD, and as always, it is my pleasure spending time with you on this broadcast with the goal that you may learn something that may improve your health and or your life. I would like to remind you that the information presented in this broadcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended for diagnosis or treatment. Please consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health. All right, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us again this week. And as you know, we're continuing with our series on breast cancer, whether we're talking about treatment or prevention. And this week we have a very, very interesting guest for you. Her name is Helayne Waldman, and she is a holistic nutrition educator with a passion for helping those with breast cancer. She is a faculty member at Hawthorne University. She's also a columnist, a private practitioner, a consultant to breast cancer clinics and doctors, and an author of the book, The Whole Food Guide for Breast Cancer Survivors, a nutritional approach to preventing recurrence. Helayne Waldman, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I actually have a copy of this book, and I've really gone through it and found it to be such a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of information. And I wonder if you could share with us what motivated you to write this book. As far as I know, you've never been diagnosed with breast cancer. Is that correct? So what motivated you to write this book?
That is correct. Well, from a personal perspective, what motivated the book was cancer in my family. I lost my father, aunt, and also a very, very dear friend to breast cancer. So that was my personal reason for writing the book. It has touched me very, very closely. But also breast cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death in women, just after lung cancer, and it represents 28% of all the cancers that women get. And that is just way, way, way too much. We can make that number smaller if women are educated about all the various things they can do to empower themselves to keep this disease at bay.
And you're right. So many women are diagnosed with this, and there's so much that can be done, and many people don't have access to this information. And the thing that you focus on in your book is that of nutrition. Why do you think nutrition is so important in the fight against breast cancer?
Well, because that's what the data has told us. For years, there's thousands of studies that support the notion that what we put in our bodies actually affects the expression of our genes. And those genes can either express or, let's say, manifest health or disease. And what we eat and the nutrients in what we eat directly affect that expression. Let me tell you about a great study that happened in quite a while ago now, in 1992, but it's such a seminal study about nutrition and cancer that I love to talk about it. What they did was they used rats, which are often used as human surrogates, as you know, in research, and they gave the rats a known carcinogen known as DMBA. Then they divided the rats into 5 groups after the carcinogen was administered. One group had no nutrients given to them. One group had one nutrient. The nutrients that were administered were vitamin C, vitamin A, and or selenium and or magnesium. Those were the 4 that they played with. So when they gave the rats one of those nutrients, the cancer rate went from 100% down to 50% with one of those nutrients. When they gave the rats 2 of those nutrients, the cancer rate went down to 30%. When they gave the rats 3 of those nutrients, the cancer rate went down to 20%. And when they got all 4 of those nutrients, the rate went down to about 11%. Now, that is a very, very profound result, and something that, we just, as I said before, we don't know about, and we should.
Absolutely, we really should. And so one of the things then is that we know we have this standard American diet. And why do you feel that this diet, and for those who are listening, people have heard the term sometimes and they don't necessarily know what it entails. So talk a little bit about the standard American diet and why you think it's not helpful in decreasing our cancer risk.
Well, the standard American diet, unfortunately, consists of a great many processed carbohydrates like cereal, pasta, and bread, and we're noticeably lacking whole foods like whole milk, cheese, pastured meat, eggs, butter, vegetables, fruits, whole grains. But what we do tend to load up on is vegetable oils and margarines and packaged products and fake soy meats. Those are big. Soy is in everything, and 90% of the soy is GMO, genetically modified at this point. So we're really not only are we getting a lot of junk that is foreign to our bodies, because these are not really foods. These are what I would call food products. I mean, they didn't come from nature. They came from a factory, so they're not really food. So we're getting some poison and a lot of toxins in that, and we're also not getting what we need, which are the B vitamins and C and D and A and choline and minerals and, all those phytonutrients. The standard American diet is very, very damaging, and we've not only seen it with cancer, but we've seen it with obesity, we've seen it with diabetes, we've seen it with a host of inflammatory disorders and autoimmune disorders and Alzheimer's and on and on and on. So we know that there's something very, very wrong with what we're putting into our bodies every day.
Absolutely. And what I wonder if you could then share, because you talk a little bit about something being wrong with what we put in our bodies every day. Unfortunately, these foods taste so good to a lot of people, and they have trouble avoiding them. Other things that are out there, in addition to the foods that we eat that are not great for us, are different toxins and exposures. Can you talk a little bit about those toxins that are out there that puts us at risk for cancer?
Yeah, well, I really have to start with genetically modified foods. I mean, I believe that, and many others as well, believe that they really are the most significant toxic threat facing us at this point. And I do want folks to know that almost 90% of our corn, 90% of our soy, our canola, or the rapeseed plant, sugar beets, and then some of our squash and alfalfa, they are genetically modified. But the things that we really need to look out for, especially, are the corn, soy, canola, and the sugar beets, because those are absolutely ubiquitous in the food supply. Now, for a long time, a lot of the research was done in Europe and wasn't really published in this country, so one could have said, the jury is out on their health effects, but there's more study results starting to creep out now, and there was a recent one from 2012 that was actually published in a journal called the Food and Chemical Toxicology Journal, and they fed genetically modified or genetically engineered corn to rats, and what they found was that the rats developed much higher incidences of cancer. Their tumors were larger, and that they died more quickly than those that were fed a normal diet. They also, there was another study done on rats in 2011, and when they looked at the rats after they were gone, dead, they showed extensive organ damage in rats that were fed genetically modified soy. Now, this is really troubling to me because what genetically modified soy actually is genetically modified to do is to withstand massive doses of pesticides. All that pesticide, of course, gets passed on to us, and when we eat processed food that says textured soy protein or textured vegetable protein or all of these products that contain soy, we are ingesting those massive quantities of glyphosate which is the main herbicide used, for soybeans. It's also troubling that in 2012, sugar beets were approved to be genetically modified, and so many of our food products say sugar. So what folks need to look for if they are going to buy a package of food with sugar in it is it should say cane sugar on it, because at least we know the sugar is not genetically modified. I mean, I'm not happy that when my clients eat sugar, but better to eat real sugar than fake sugar. So that, I think, is at the top of my list. Now, second, right underneath all that is real sugar and other kinds of artificial sweeteners, because artificial sweeteners really are toxic. Again, they're not native to the body, and formaldehyde is the breakdown product of aspartame, and formaldehyde is a known carcinogen. So we have that problem. Splenda is a chlorinated sugar, so it's got chlorine molecules in it attached to sugar, which chlorine we know also is a toxin, and it also competes in our body with iodine. So the more chlorine that we ingest, the less iodine we're able to absorb, and iodine is one of our anti-cancer nutrients. See, some of the other things I like to warn people about are Teflon cookware. That, especially when it's heated to a high temperature, releases, and especially when it's scratched, can be very, very toxic. Plastics, like the phthalates that are found in plastic drinking water bottles, the BPA that's found in some bottles and can and package liners, these mimic estrogen. And so they really increase what I would call our estrogen load, making it very difficult for our bodies to actually be able to process that much estrogen. In terms of our personal care products, those are a real problem as well, because they have chemicals in them like ethylene oxide and dioxane and nitrosamines, also formaldehyde, acrylamide, which is a known carcinogen, which, by the way, is also very prevalent in potato chips. So these toxins actually go right through the skin when we put these personal care products on our skin, and especially if they're made with what are called nanoparticles, because those are little tiny particles that can actually get very easily into the blood vessels and then just travel all over our bodies. A few other toxins I want to mention that people might not necessarily think of as toxins per se, but to me they certainly are. I would say that farmed fish are quite toxic because they are fed a diet of genetically modified corn and soy and given lots of antibiotics and sometimes other drugs. Our tap water can be quite toxic to us, depending upon where we live, but many communities, all municipal water supplies are chlorinated, and as I mentioned before, that does compete with iodine, and the other chemical that is liberally dropped into many communities' water is fluoride, and fluoride competes with iodine. So when we are drinking chlorine and fluoride every day, we're making ourselves terribly deficient in iodine. As I said, especially with breast cancer, iodine is one of the key nutrients that helps protect our breast cells. And these toxins are stored in adipose tissue, meaning fat cells, and so those who are overweight are going to have even higher risk than others because they're more toxic.
You weren't kidding when you said that these toxins are ubiquitous. I mean, you mentioned some of the foods that we eat on a daily basis, and I think many times we don't think about it, the artificial sugar or the genetically modified foods, the cookware, plastic. We've heard a lot in the media recently about the plastic drinking water bottle. And so some of these things I think we can avoid, but then there are others I wonder how much we're able to avoid. And so I wanted you to just comment on something like the corn or the beets. When someone is to walk into the supermarket and say they're shopping and they're trying to be healthy, would these things mention, is there a label that would indicate that they're genetically modified?
Well, that's been a political battle that's been fought, for the past few years, and we actually had a proposition on the California ballot here, where I live, to label genetically modified foods, and unfortunately the biotech companies poured so much money into the campaign that that proposition went down. There's another one, I think, pending in Washington State as we speak, but by and large, no. There is not labeling of genetically modified ingredients in this country. I think it's a travesty. I think that if the biotech companies are so confident that there's nothing problematic about their foods, then they really shouldn't have a problem letting people know that, they should be proud of them if they're so wonderful for us. So it's a serious problem, Dr. Diane. It really is. And I'm hoping that, this initiative will pass in Washington. Maybe that can be a model state for others to follow suit. But right now, no, we don't have labeling of these ingredients.
Which I agree with you. It is a travesty. We're going to take a short break for our sponsors. When we do come back, we'll talk a little bit about organic foods. And one of the things you mentioned earlier is the relationship between cancer and sugar. We'll talk about that because so many of us consume a lot of sugar, and I think this is important information for us to know. So we'll take a short break, and we will be back shortly.
You're listening to the FMG Radio Network, where our motto is have fun, make money, do good. We provide platforms to individuals who have a cause, message, or information that they would like to share with the world. If you'd like to join the FMG family and have your own radio show, please call us at 1-800-470-4982. That's 1-800-470-4982. We look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Health Talk. And my guest today is Helayne Waldman, who is a holistic nutrition educator and very passionate about helping women with breast cancer. And she's co-author of the book, The Whole Food Guide for Breast Cancer Survivors, a Nutritional Approach to Preventing Recurrence. And she shared with us some really important information earlier in the show about some of the toxins that are out there. And I'm sure many of you are now aware that you're probably consuming these on a daily basis. Helayne, I wonder if you could comment on, because you sort of brought it up earlier, the relationship between cancer and sugar.
Oh, sure. Sugar is actually, and again, I'm talking about any kind of sugar, not just the genetically modified type of sugar, but sugar actually depresses the immune system. And 1 can of Coke can depress the white blood cell count for about 5 to 6 hours. So when you think about the fact that many people are drinking, a few cans of Coke a day or a few cans of soda a day, and that has about maybe 10 to 12 teaspoonfuls of sugar in it, that's a chronically depressed immune system. So that's going to that's going to be a risk factor for cancer in the first place. But once a cancer has taken hold in the body, there was a doctor and a biochemist named Otto Warburg who won a Nobel Prize actually in 1931. He was brilliant, and he did a lot of research on cancer. And he found out that cancer cells are different than our other cells because our other cells can actually use fat or sugar to provide energy, to create energy. But cancer cells are completely dependent on sugar. So Warburg called cancer cells obligate sugar metabolizers, meaning they have no other way to get energy other than from sugar. So they form themselves in a particular way so that they can reach out and grab as much sugar as possible. They actually have receptors on them which are specific to taking in insulin. Insulin is sort of a companion to sugar. It helps sugar get into cells. So when you have more insulin receptors on a cell, it means you're bringing more sugar into those cells. And we know that cancer cells have a lot more insulin receptors on them than normal cells. And it's estimated that their uptake of sugar is probably about 5 times that of normal cells. So we know there are several ways in which sugar itself can actually accelerate the growth of a cancer. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, sugar also, more sugar in the blood increases the amount of insulin in the blood because insulin not only accompanies or helps sugar get into the cells, but it also helps to manage the level of sugar in our blood. So if there's too much, which obviously there is when we drink a soda, our pancreas is going to secrete insulin, which is a hormone, to manage to push down that level of blood sugar. That's one of its jobs, is to help manage our blood sugar levels. But another job of insulin, in addition to that, is that it is a growth hormone. It's a catalyst in promoting cell growth. So if we eat more sugar, then we're going to be having a lot of excess insulin roaming around our bodies, and that's going to be promoting a lot of extra cell growth, and that's going to profoundly increase the risk and the progression of cancer.
Wow, so we really need to pay a lot more attention to the amount of sugar that we're putting in our bodies. And, of course, in a country where we consume so much sugar, what would you suggest as alternatives for, people who want to avoid sugars, but, they still have a sweet tooth?
Yeah, I know. It is. It's very difficult. Sugar is very, very addictive. But people need to remember this, which is that nature never intended for us to consume this much sugar, and nature never intended for us to, when we do take in sugar, in forms that are so refined that there's no fiber or nothing else to help modulate, that rush of sugar into our bloodstream. So if we use sugars in moderation that have other factors to help modulate the rush into our bloodstream, like raw honey, pure maple syrup, stevia. Those are some natural sweeteners that, yes, they will raise your blood sugar, but not in the dramatic way that refined sugar will, not as quickly. Therefore, you will have less insulin in your body. You will have less growth-promoting activity in your body. So I would suggest those. I would not recommend anything like NutraSweet or Splenda. As I mentioned earlier, those are toxins. Those are not foods. Those are chemicals. So it's like taking a toxic drug. Anytime you drink a soda, a diet soda, or you put some Splenda or Equal or NutraSweet in your coffee, it's like taking a drug. Another way, so first of all, you can switch over to healthy sweeteners. There's a couple of sweeteners that I particularly like. One is called xylitol, and it is a sugar. It's from birch trees, but it's a sugar that has no impact on blood glucose. Interestingly enough, it's spelled Xylitol. The thing that's amazing about it is that it's pretty indistinguishable from cane sugar. It looks like it, it tastes like it, it bakes like it. You don't even have to have any differences, equivalencies in your baking. So that's something that can be used. But even so, I would try and back off because our bodies are just not designed to really take in that much sugar. A couple of other things I want to mention about that. Sugar will raise your blood sugar profoundly when it's eaten in isolation. So if you drink a Coke or even if you drink a glass of fruit juice, which has some health benefits to it, but it's largely sugar because we've taken the fiber out of the fruit. We take an apple and we juice it. All we have left is the sugary part of the apple, not the fiber. So if we are going to eat something sweet and we combine it with fiber or a healthy fat or with protein, that slows down the release. So instead of turning the faucet on full, it becomes more of a drip. That's what we want. So we can also be careful about how we eat, when we eat sugar, how we do it. And it will be less harmful for us if we combine it with protein, fat, healthy fat, or fiber. There's also some herbs that are wonderful in modulating blood sugar. Cinnamon is one of them. Cinnamon is one of the best blood sugar modulators around. So if you like cinnamon and, you want to have a treat, something kind of an apple crisp or something, and there's sugar in it, make sure there's plenty of cinnamon as well. Now, I don't say any of this to encourage anyone to eat sugar because I absolutely discourage people to eat sugar, but these are sort of transitional things that you can do as you are trying to back off on the sugar. These are some ways that you can still have some sweetness as you try and, as I say, move back and back off those high levels of sugar. Many women actually do crave sweets because they have unbalanced neurotransmitters in their brain, like serotonin. So sometimes eating high tryptophan foods like turkey or bananas might help to increase serotonin production because the amino acid tryptophan actually is the raw material for the production of serotonin. And some people find that supplementing with tryptophan or its metabolite called 5-HTP can be useful to help balance neurotransmitter levels, and when they get balanced, they find they don't crave the sugar as much. So what I do to try and keep on top of this with my clients is I have them monitor what's called their hemoglobin A1C level. That's something they can get in a blood test. Their doctor can authorize it, or they can go on the web. There's labs where you can do sort of a self-service blood testing now. And this looks at your blood sugar level over the past, say, 3 months or so. And if we have a reasonable level, and I would say reasonable in this case would be probably under maybe somewhere between 4.7 and 5.3 would be reasonable, then we know that our body is handling our sugar well and it's not causing us problems. But when that level starts to creep up, 5.7, 5.8, and when it's over 6, then we're already on our way to diabetes, then we really have to get very aggressive about managing our blood sugar. It is key to the control of cancer.
Okay, so there we have different types of alternatives to sugar and making sure that the blood sugar is well managed. Now, I know that in your book, and the book, by the way, is called The Whole Food Guide for Breast Cancer Survivors, a Nutritional Approach to Preventing Recurrence. One of the things that's mentioned is that of organic food, and there is some controversy about that. From time to time, people will say it's important that you go organic. Others will say it doesn't matter. What we do know for sure is that organic tends to be more expensive. So for those who are on the fence, who are contemplating whether or not they should shell out the extra money to get organic foods, what do you say?
Well, I say organic is always better, but I understand that some people can't go all organic. So let me just start by saying why organic is always better, and then I'll give you some advice for folks who need to watch their budget. So why is organic always better? Well, obviously, part of why organic is better is because of what you don't get. And it's kind of funny that we have to pay more for getting less in a way. But the typical vegetable or fruit out there might have as much as 20 different pesticides applied to it. Something like a strawberry or a potato that's very vulnerable has many, 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 many different types of pesticides, and some of these are known or have been classified by the World Health Organization, some as possible carcinogens and some as probable carcinogens. So there's no doubt that these pesticides are wreaking havoc on our body. As we talked about before, GMOs are a real threat, and if something is not organic, we cannot be sure that there are not genetically modified aspects to it. Now, that doesn't come up as much in just fruits and vegetables, but more in the packaged foods. But right now, the organic standard says that they may not contain GMO ingredients. So you are assured of that there's no GMOs. But I think the part that people sometimes don't realize is not only what you don't get, but what you do get when you get organic. Because the way I like to think about it, the way I like to teach it is this. I say, look, plants can't be healthy unless the soil is healthy, right? When the soil is not healthy, then farmers have to apply all kinds of fertilizers and products to try and get them to grow, because they won't grow otherwise. But if you have healthy soil, and it has things like magnesium and calcium and silicon, trace minerals like silicon and boron and vanadium and chromium and all kinds of fabulously important nutrients for our body, then the plant is going to not need those fertilizers. Well, that's how organic farming works, is it works by relying on the health of the soil. And what those plants get from the soil are all those wonderful vitamins and minerals. And we're very blessed when we eat organic food that those plants then pass on those fabulously healthy nutrients to us. It's a gift. We don't get that gift from conventional produce, unfortunately. So I think that organic is always going to be better for those reasons. Now, It's true. Some people cannot afford organic, although we have done price comparisons looking at what people buy. And for most folks, if they give up the packaged foods and they give up some of the expensive products that they buy, they find that they actually can afford organic because it's cheaper than buying something in a box with pretty colors and all kinds of, rainbow decorations. It really is. But if they truly cannot, there is a environmental resource out there provided by the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, Environmental Working Group. And what they have is they have a list they call the Dirty Dozen, and these are the worst offenders, fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides and herbicides and fungicides applied to them in the biggest amounts. And they also have a list called the Clean 15. So if you go to that website, EWG.org, they have a downloadable list of the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15, and you actually can print it out and fold it up and put it in your wallet and take it with you to the market so that, you can choose, you can prioritize which fruits and vegetables you're going to get organic and which ones you're not. And the last thing I wanted to mention about that was that most communities now have farmers market, and many of the farmers markets offer lots and lots of organic options. And you take the middleman out when you go to the farmers market. So you're actually paying a lot less for an organic, let's say an organic peach at the farmers market than you would at Whole Foods, for example. So if you can find your local farmers market or community-supported agriculture where they will actually deliver, you can subscribe like I do. I get a box every week of organic fruits and vegetables from a local farm. It works out financially to be affordable because, again, you do not have the infrastructure of the market to add that extra cost.
So that's great advice for those who are thinking organic but probably think it's a little bit too expensive. Now, this brings us to the end of this part of our interview with Helayne Waldman. We are going to continue with the second part of the interview, and we will continue so you can find us back here next week with the continuation. And you really want to come back for that because we're going to talk a little bit more about other nutrients in the diet and some of her favorite nutrients for lowering the breast cancer risk. So until next week, please do something healthy. Remember, your health is your wealth. And come back and join us for the rest of the interview with Helayne Waldman on preventing breast cancer recurrence with the use of proper nutrition. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Health Talk with Dr. Diane, MD. For show replays and full guest bios, please be sure to visit fmgradio.com/Dr. Diane, MD. That's DRDIANE, MD.